so that we don't have to trudge through 500 pages in order to understand what the true impacts are of any particular project. But oftentimes, like it happens so very often to me, after I sit down, then someone comes in and basically spins my information saying, well, that information is already there. Come the following week, and someone else then spins the information again some other way. So I figured I needed to demonstrate what I was talking about. What I handed to you is a summary, a 2-page summary of the draft environmental impact report for City Center 2. And what I have done is basically taking the information concerning the height and number of residential units, hotel rooms, a section for parking, a section for population, a section on water impact, pretty much follow through on the same concept of the environmental impact report. Now, once you put this stuff together this way, it's kind of similar to a financial statement, like a profit and loss or a balance sheet. Just a top-level view of what are the impacts in this case for an environmental impact report. Now, what dawned on me is that this particular environmental impact report has the potential of obtaining additional floors and additional density if we take advantage of bonuses. And it dawned on me that perhaps the way these things are set out, that the environmental impact report doesn't give the full effect of all the environmental impacts if the builder decides to move forward with the additional levels and additional density. But nonetheless, I wanted to at least, if you can look at the first page, for example, this building will be 237 feet by right, 245. 237 is what's stated, but it theoretically could go up to 350. It has 20 floors. By right, it could be 16, but it has the option of going up to 23 stories. This caught my attention because that's exactly the way the building on Central and Sanchez, the Unum Provident building, got built. It started from an area that has commercial for about 8 floors. Then the paperwork was set out so it could go up to 18. And lo and behold, irrespective of the hundreds of signatures from the community, basically got approved for 24 plus additional towers above. Now, in this particular report, what dawned on me is that if you take the cumulative information of the 51 projects, it says the city will have an additional 10,918 residents. Okay? In terms of water usage, I mentioned before, we would have 1,022 acre-feet of water, which is 28.3 million gallons of water. All the information here is basically summarized and taken from that particular EIR. Now, you notice that there are many gaps in here. Well, the gap that really astonished me is that there is no information concerning, for example, electricity use, right? We don't know what the expected kilowatt hour is per resident. We don't know what the CO2 emissions will be for this particular building. We don't know what the carbon footprint would be. So it's amazing that in this day and age, you can have an EIR without the electrical component. Now, of course, if the building becomes LEED certified, then, of course, we would have some lesser impacts with regard to electricity and maybe some additional considerations for less water use. Well, my suggestion is that if the city were to provide this kind of information to you, it makes it very easy to understand the environmental impacts of a particular project and the cumulative impacts of all the other ones, especially if you have just a 2-page summary, right, for each one of the projects. The only area that is missing, that is not comprehensive here, is the traffic and congestion, which I intend to do a separate document for that. And this is what I'm talking about. To effectively communicate in summarized form to the public and to you what the impacts are of any project so that we could all understand how it is that you go about making decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the last card I had on oral communication. Mr. Starbird, did you get a copy of this?
No, I didn't. I'd appreciate one.
And why don't you take a look at that? I think that's a great idea if there's a way to do that. Okay. What's next, please?
6A is Director, well, on the business agenda, 6A is Director of Development Services regarding update on the facade improvement grant program in the Central, Glendale, and San Fernando Road corridor project areas. It's information only.
Okay, and with that, I'll go to Mr. Lansdowne.
Mr. Chairman, members of the agency, we wanted to bring back an item to you that gave you a bit of an update on the activity that's happening with our facade grant program. We've made some changes, and we did quite a bit of marketing maybe 24 months ago, and we have several projects to show you. Jackie Bartlow, the project manager that oversees this program, is going to run you through some of the before and afters. One of the things that we want to stress about the program is that it makes physical improvements in eliminating blight and carrying out your mission as part of the agency. But they are what we might term, in some respects, permanent improvements. So as tenants change out, maybe signage would go away, but basic bones of the building stay in place. So we really like this program, partially to give you some information about it now, but partially we'd like to present it as a marketing piece for others in the project areas that might want to take advantage of the program. So with that, I'll turn it to Jackie.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and agency members. As Phil stated, the goal of this program is to assist in the complete renovation and revitalization of commercial building facades within the redevelopment project areas. When we came before you in January 2005, we requested some modifications to the program. What we requested was to increase the dollar amount from $30,000 to $40,000, as well as decrease the financial responsibility of the applicant, reduced it from 50% to 25%. Along with that request, we also requested a building conservation grant. That was a new grant. That grant was to encourage those property owners that had buildings that were either historically significant or on the historic survey. That program, we requested a maximum of $50,000 with no financial responsibility on the part of the applicant. Both programs are allowed up to $2,500 reimbursement for architect design fees. The eligible improvements are signage, windows and doors, exterior painting, stucco, brick, decorative treatments, lighting, minor landscaping, as well as trash enclosures. We don't include roofs, and we don't do asphalt driveways and parking lots. To date, we've completed 9 projects. 7 of those are within the San Fernando corridor, 2 in the Central Glendale area, totaling over $349,000 in grant funding. Currently, we have 4 projects under construction, 3 in the San Fernando corridor, 1 in the Central project area. That could total up to $170,000 based on the max dollar amounts. I'd like to say in advance that 3 of those projects are pretty much complete at this time. Since this report was written, those have been completed. You will see those in a couple slides. This is 336 North Central. It's a multi-tenant building. As you can see in the top slide, it needed a lot of work. It's a brick building. It had a canopy, a soft canopy parapet here, and some outdated can signs. And what the owner did was he worked with our architect. At the time, we had a consultant that we worked with. These are the suggestions that we made, and they were agreeable to those. We changed the parapet to a black parapet as an accent, added some paint here, accented the windows with the black paint. We have new signage here. We've replaced all of the brick here. Initially, they wanted to just pressure wash it, but in doing that, it pitted the brick, and so they replaced all of it. As you notice here and here, there are air conditioners. Was suggested that they remove those and place them out of sight, and so we replaced those windows and moved them down below. and changed out the landscaping. The next one is Porto's Bakery at 315 North Brand. This actually was a project that took place prior to the modifications, but since you hadn't seen it, I thought I'd add it to this project here, to this program. What they did was they added new signage, new doors, tile, awnings, windows, painting, and at the same time, they extended the property to include the old numero unos and did the same here. And that allowed them to increase their sidewalk dining. The next one is at 3720 San Fernando Road, which is Color Me Mine. That one actually came before you for a sign variance. This was a vacant property. The tile, which is black here, had cracks in it. The brick needed to be brought back to life. The windows were in bad shape, and so what they did was replaced all of the windows, installed new awnings, updated this tile. It's also black like it was before. They did pressure washing and some painting. They painted on the side as well, because you can see that building from the side. As you can see here, this is all new, and the doors. The next project is King Furniture at 4019 San Fernando Road. This is their before picture, which was a brick building with old signage. They've had a lot of graffiti that had been painted over, old windows and so forth. So what they did was replace the windows, the doors, got rid of the brick. It's now stucco and decorative stone. They have some additional lighting, new signage. And you can see actually a nighttime photo here. They actually got rid of this door, and there are a few other openings that they replaced as well. This they just updated. The next slide, which is 4616 San Fernando Road, which is Glendale Tile. This is actually my favorite project. Very outdated, old industrial type building, old signage, as you can see the can signs. They had awnings on all of the windows as well as bars. So what they did was they pressure washed the building, new windows, new awnings, signage. They did the roof and the asphalt parking lot, and this is what they got. It actually looked like they installed new brick, and they didn't. It was just all pressure washing. As you can see, updated channel letter signage that's backlit. But that's my favorite project. The next project is Patrick's Cafe at 6720 San Fernando Road. This project was the building is listed on the historic survey, and so we discussed quite a bit this before they actually started the work and after they started. What they did was they did maintain the Googie style architecture, and then they added new paint, stucco, removed this railing, and took out all of the landscaping and replaced that. New signage. They maintained the same style of sign, but just updated it. They also included a trash enclosure, updated the patio, and redid the parking lot. This is 6800 San Fernando Road. It's the Foster's Donut and Mini Mall. This was a difficult one to figure out how to upgrade. This one, it's a multi-tenant. What they did was they removed the signage and they got new signage. They painted. They did a trash enclosure, added a parapet, which I'll show you on the next slide, and pressure washed the brick. These are still all old shots, the before shots. Our camera wasn't so great, so it's a little fuzzy. But as you can see, there's the channel lettering type signage, and what they did was they incorporated each of the individual businesses' style and design for their business into the signage. They added this top parapet. They lightened up the paint. The owner redid the parking lot. I'll show you the next slide, which actually shows This is the new trash enclosure. This used to be just open trash containers here, but you have a restaurant here, so the smell, and it was just unsightly. And so we suggested that they do that. They pressure washed the brick. I think I said that. And for the most part, everything else maintained what was there before. These are additional photos of the after. This is 4112 through 20 West Colorado. It's the Colorado Center. Here, they did some new signs, new paint, brightened it up, some landscaping and lighting, windows. Not a whole lot, but for instance, this building here, they were out of compliance with their signage. The other side here, this was all faded, outdated signs, canned signs. A lot of landscaping, so you really couldn't see the property. And this is what they did, updated the signage as well. They incorporated the design that the business had for their signage. Landscaping here, removed some of the heavy, thick brush and installed this type. They redid the parking lot, added some additional lighting and some fountain work in the back, removed all of the foliage in the back here. This is directly across the street from the last project, 427 West Colorado, the Perique building. And they did subtle changes here. What they did was they removed, this is, it's kind of a block type brick here. They removed all of this at the bottom and replaced it with a decorative brick below. They took out all of the landscaping, replaced it with some low-growing landscaping, so it opened up the building. They removed the awning and framed the door, then added a top parapet just to kind of give it some height. They also it's hard to see here in the photo, but they accented the windows with somewhat of a light yellow paint, which matches the side of the building. These are the projects that were initially under construction that are pretty much done now. This is Royal Palace. This project actually came before you as well for a design review. This is what it looked like previously. Recessed entrance, like an old theater design. This is the new look. That included paint, decorative doors and windows, some concrete panels, a new parapet, lighting, and extending the facade out to the property line. This is the next project, 5720 San Fernando Road, is the Galleria Car Wash. This project is pretty much finished as well. As you can see, it's just an old stucco type design, outdated. Their proposal included new paint, stucco, block exterior, wrought iron, fencing, and landscaping. And this is what their proposal is. And some of these projects, the ones that have been completed, they actually have not come into the city and submitted the final, gone through the final process for completing it. And that's why they're listed under construction. But that's the design that they proposed and what it will look like when it's completed. This is 6735 San Fernando Road. This is a multi-tenant commercial building. This one is actually under construction. And what they're doing is they're repainting the brick. This is all brick. Redesigning the canopy here. New doors and new windows. And this is actually, the architect's very good because it's actually not a photo. It's more of a rendering. But this is what the look will be. And this here is kind of a wavy metal design. Can't think of a better term for it. But as you can see, it kind of brightens up that area and bring it up to a more modern look. This project, 432 through 442, you also saw this project for design review. What they proposed was new paint, windows, doors, stucco, a new canopy, roof line, some additional landscaping, and removing the shingled roof as well as the brick veneer to make it more of a symmetrical type of building. And this is what they proposed. So that it's symmetrical from this side to that side. All of it's stucco and different color paints to kind of create an accent, new landscaping. This project is done. He called me today to say that he had completed the project. And that ends the presentation.
Any questions? Is there a motion to note on file?
So moved.
The motion second, roll call.
Who was the second? Thank you. Agency members Draymond?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver?
Aye.
Chairman Yusefian.
Aye. Next, please.
At 6B is public hearing, Director of Development Services regarding proposed six-story, 63-unit residential condominium development project located at 111 and 115 North Louise Street, former DPSS site. A B1 is motion approving Stage 1 design review subject to comments and conditions from the city's principal urban designer and agency.
Okay, and with that, I'll go to Mr. Lansing.
Mr. Chairman, members of the agency, this is a project that has two elements to it, a residential condominium and then an office. This is the old Department of Public and Social Service building at Louise and Broadway. The item that's before you today is the residential portion of that. It is a Stage 1 where we're looking at site planning, massing, scale. For the report, I'd like to invite Deputy Director Dave Ahern to the podium. Introduce it to you.
I think this, we're looking at the project that is the property that was north of the DPSS building.
That is correct. The office building.
Not the office building.
Not the office building, the property to the north.
Yes.
Dave will probably tell you all the statistics on it.
That's correct. Mr. Chairman, members of the agency, Dave Ahern. The project before the agency today is the residential component of what we've been looking at as the DPSS project. So it is a proposed 63-unit residential project, 6 stories in height. The proposed project is located at 111 North Louise Street, which is mid-block on the west side of Louise between Broadway and Wilson. The project site includes the 2 surface parking lots currently owned by the agency. It also includes residential parcel to the south of those lots that the developer is in escrow to acquire, and a small public alley running east and west between the DPSS building and that apartment building. The project's located in the Maryland district of the Downtown Specific Plan. The district permits a 4-story building by right and a 6-story building with incentives that are allowed in the DSP with a maximum height of 95 feet. The applicant's proposal is a 6-story building utilizing the incentive, but his height is 74 feet, so under the 95-foot cap. The applicant is proposing to utilize the open space incentive in the DSP and is proposing approximately 2,500 square feet of open space, a paseo between the DSP building and what will be the site of this 63-unit project. The architectural style of the building is a contemporary style. The city's principal urban planner, Alan Loomis, who's here today, has reviewed this for the agency as he does all our projects. Mr. Loomis is recommending approval of the design based on conditions, and those conditions are on page 3 and 4 of your report, I believe, which is typical for a Stage 1 review. With that, based on Mr. Loomis's recommendation, staff is recommending approval of the Stage 1 design. The project applicant is here in the audience today. His architect is here. They would like to make a brief presentation to the agency. So at this time, unless the agency has questions of me, I'll take my seat and let the applicant speak to you.
I'd like to have Mr. Loomis come up and talk about some of the conditions that he has put in here as part of staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the agency. There are really outlined 9 specific recommendations and comments that were included in the review. A number of these had to do with simply providing us some additional information related to some dimensional calculations, that sort of stuff, to confirm compliance with the downtown specific plan. In those cases, we were simply scaling off the drawings, but we'd like the applicant to provide the information for us. The number one condition is that final approval of the project will hinge on the vacation of the alley. Their FAR calculations and the open space incentive is contingent on the east-west alley being vacated and being incorporated into the project site.
Who owns the alley currently?
My understanding is the city owns it presently.
It's a city alley. If it is vacated, it would then go to the property owner on either side. The developer is in escrow to purchase that private property, and if they were to go forward with an agreement with the agency to purchase the DPSS building, they would own both sides. When you vacate, it would then go to those property owners.
And my understanding it's a substandard alley?
Yes.
Less than 20 feet?
It is, yeah, and it's really just a pedestrian alley. It's not necessarily vehicular.
Okay. Next.
Another comment that is a requirement is that the applicant will have to prepare a public art plan and an art proposal and bring that forward to the Arts and Culture Commission and eventually the City Council, if necessary, for approval as a part of the requirements of the downtown specific plan. At this point, they haven't indicated how they're going to incorporate public art into the project, although they've given some thoughts that it's going to be located in the vacated east-west alley that will become a pedestrian passage. The remaining comments that I provide are really suggestions and considerations for the design team to look into that have to do with providing some additional variation on the facade, exploring some color options that might relate the building to, say, the post office or the existing DPSS building. The principal one really is about the south facade, which faces the east-west pedestrian passage that's being proposed. Raised a number of concerns about the character of that facade, and I've talked to the applicants at length about enlivening that facade and what they might be able to do to make that facade and the east-west pedestrian passage as attractive a space as possible. So those are a brief summary of the 9 comments I've provided.
Thank you. With that, any questions from staff?
Thank you.
This time I'm going to open the public hearing and going to ask for Chris or Rodney. You want to come first? Rodney, okay.
Thank you, Chairman and agency members.
Your name for the record.
My name is Rodney Kahn. My offices are located here in the city of Glendale. And I'm here today as an entitlement consultant on behalf of the Amity Real Estate Group. A few things that I think is important to note. Staff talked about some of the numbers. I'd like to talk a little bit of context of the neighborhood. In terms of what the surrounding land uses are and what the surrounding buildings are, this site is very challenging. Directly north is the Mann 10 Theaters, which is basically a 40-foot-high brick box that extends from property line to property line. To the south, and you can see in your packages that we provided photographs, we also have, as was referred to, there's a substandard alley. The alley is actually 15 feet in width by about 150 feet in length. And that's between the DPSS office building and the 16-unit apartment building. To the west of our site is also a north-south alley that has a fair amount of truck traffic in it, along with some dumpsters and trash enclosures. West of that is retail. To the east of our site is the YMCA, along with the post office with their loading areas. This project is going to significantly improve that block. And hopefully, we are hoping, by investing this in Glendale, investing this money in this project, it will act as a catalyst to other property in the area to redevelop as well. I mentioned this pedestrian or this existing alley, and what we're looking at doing, as called out in the downtown specific plan, it was to look at creating pedestrian open space networks. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking this alley, this substandard alley, and creating a pedestrian paseo. There's some conceptual plans that have been provided in your packages that shows it more as kind of a grasscrete type alleyway. That is very preliminary. As we continue to refine the design, we're looking at introducing something like interlocking pavers. We're looking at introducing some types of trees that are less canopy-oriented, so it's not a dark, narrow passageway with just the trees, but more light and airy, like some type of bamboo or some type of treatment like that, we think would be very beneficial to the paseo. Also, as Mr. Loomis mentioned, we're looking at introducing our art component to the project in that area as well. So we think something new and exciting will happen as a result of this new pedestrian paseo. Just real briefly, and then I'll turn it over to our architect, Chris Dikiakos, who will walk you through the design of the project. We are completing our CEQA document, which is an EIR. Impact Sciences is our lead consultants. We've done sub-consultant studies for the historic resource as it relates to the existing office building, and we've also done a traffic study as it relates to the overall project. If all goes well, we are hoping that on December 18th, which is the last meeting date of the year for this agency, that we would be back in front of you for final approval for the EIR, our development agreement, and final stage 2. Anyway, those are my remarks. I'll conclude on that, and I'll turn it over to our architect unless you have any questions for me.
Not yet.
Thank
Please
you.
take a seat. Don't go too far. Chris? Your name for the record, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Dikiakos. I'm project architect for this development. I'd like to walk everybody through the project, give you a description of what it is that we've done. Rodney and staff have given a brief description of the overall numbers as they relate to the project, but I'd like to walk you through a little bit of the architecture, if I may. Thank you. Sure. Thank you. The development itself, as Rodney discussed, is adjacent to the existing DPS building on the south, the theaters on the north, an alleyway that runs north-south on the west side of the project, and Louise Street on the east side of the project.
Chris, could you please use the pointer, because when you put your hand out there, the television camera doesn't.
Will do, thank you.
The public can't see.
The development itself, as was discussed, is 6 levels. It's a podium-type building with ground level access to the parking structure, as well as the residential lobby along Louise Street, access to the parking, and we've also incorporated 3 residential units on the ground floor. We've done this for many reasons, the most important one of which is to try and enliven and provide some real activity on the street level, which often you don't get with these types of developments. Further to that, the parking itself is 2.5 levels, circulates around underground. It meets all the requirements of the downtown specific plan. We're parking at 2.25 stalls per unit, 143 total parking stalls, which also includes, that underground also includes storage facilities for the residents. The layout itself of the building is in a U shape, as you see here. Fronting on Louise Street, We have the highest facade at 5 stories above the one-level podium. The building itself, as you see in this image here, of the actual courtyard, terraces down as you get to the alley on the west side of the property, and creates this internal courtyard space, which is fully landscaped, has some large private courtyard areas, a swimming pool, and some water features, which we're introducing to try and limit some of the noise that you're getting from surrounding areas. So that will actually be a fountain-type feature. The purple-colored area here is the main amenity space, approximately 1,000 square feet for the building, and corridor wrap around the perimeter of the building. Some of the reasons for the building shape and orientation really stem, again, from the constraints that we've got on either side of the site. With the theaters on the one side, it was imperative that we create a corridor on the back side because, of course, that's a blank side of the building, and try to create as much light, air, and space on the internal courtyard area, as I hope this demonstrates. As you move up the building, all units have at least 90 square feet of private deck space. They all have access, of course, to this internal courtyard. The units along Louise Street, of course, get lots of light, and also have all their own private balconies, as do the others. One of the comments made by Mr. Loomis include what we're going to do with the treatment of the Paseo and what actually faces the Paseo from our property. Again, as I mentioned, we're really faced with a constraint here, both the narrowness of the alley and also the fact that the back side of the DPS building is a totally blank facade, approximately 35 to 40 feet high. So we felt both from a livability standpoint of the building that we're creating and the units that we're creating, and the overlook that they would have, that it was much better to actually face those on the inside. Having said that, we don't necessarily disagree with the comments either, because this Paseo is going to become an important element in the actual development of the property. And one of the suggestions that we had, as I mentioned, we have these individual units on the front of the building, all of which have front doors right onto Louise Street. We do have opportunities to take a front door and possibly open it onto this breezeway side to try and continue some of that activity that we're creating along Louise Street and bring it back around on the breezeway side. Some of the elevations of the building. This shows a partial composite of the edge of the DPSS building and the theaters, both of which are have a significant amount of brick on them. What we've done is we're bringing some of the brick elements onto the base of our building, again to create some real substance at the base, and also to try and tie in a bit to the streetscape created. The main materials of the building, concrete on the ground floor, faced with the brick as noted. The upper levels have a series of steel and glass canopies, metal and glass railings, and a variety of stucco finishes on the building themselves. We're looking also at possibly some precast concrete on these strong horizontal sills that we're creating under the windows of the building. This is the facade that actually faces the Paseo that I was just mentioning. What we've done on this side here is, as our main floor through the central area includes the access to the parking, we've created a landscape screen element which will have effectively a living wall screen along that edge. The building itself has been set back a further 5 feet from the Paseo so that it's at least a 20-foot setback from the adjacent building. From there and up, we have a series of walkways that lead to the individual units. Again, this gives the opportunity that, unlike many apartment buildings which have enclosed corridors, we actually have open corridors along all sides of the building, again, to try and increase some of that light and air that's included within the building. In terms of further treatment, we've considered the first 3 floors with solid railings. Again, because of privacy, we're hoping that there's going to be a lot of use and activity along that paseo. As you get to the upper part of the building, we're lightening it up and actually using open rails similar to the treatment of the balconies. Backside of the building on the other alley, again, a continuation of this open metal screen. Again, taking some of these brick elements into the interior of the building, creating some strong vertical forms, and again, the open metal and glass railings. We've done a preliminary study on some of the materials and textures that we're planning to use and proposing to use on the building. Again, the brick that matches the DPSS building. We're using glass railings along with detailed metalwork on the balconies. We tend to like to use glass as a backdrop to the actual metal itself because we find as people sit on their balconies, it's very important to get some wind screening as well. The trellising and glazing of the building will be a silver anodized aluminum. And 3 different colors of stucco for the building itself. The windows will be a clear glass material. I have one last image I'd like to show, and that's a composite that we did incorporating the building into the streetscape, just so everybody gets a look and feel as to what we're actually proposing. One other item that I'd like to note is I believe Mr. Ahern had noted the building height at 74 feet. We've actually reduced it to 65 feet, as by code that is the maximum that we can go on this type of building form. So we've reduced the height 65 feet total, which is well under the maximum allowable. We've got lots more information here, but I think I'd like to just leave it to questions.
Any questions? Okay, I got a couple. You have a water feature in the center of the courtyard. The only amenity you have is a jacuzzi. It looks like your water feature is a fountain. It's a pretty long one, which is very nice. Did you think about possibly using that to create some type of a lap pool? So you can still have the fountain. It just pours into the lap pool, and so you could actually use it to swim in. I can see you going like this. You probably thought about it.
It's actually a very good idea. Of course, it becomes much more usable than what we have right now. We would have to incorporate something like a swim jet if somebody actually wanted to swim. It's not big enough or long enough, of course, to do that. I think what we'd like to do, I think that's an excellent suggestion. What we'd like to do is check our height in our parking area just to make sure that we can actually drop the pool, because that's what it would have to do.
Okay.
So if we can drop it and have the headroom, I think that would be a terrific amenity for the building.
I like the way the shape of the building is. I understand Mr. Loomis probably wanted to turn that around so it was more open into the breezeway. Am I correct? That's what you're, from what I hear. Part of the reasons I think I wouldn't want to do that is because that alley on the other side is a pretty busy alley. By turning this building around, while it will be nice because you will be looking at the DPSS and the breezeway, it will subject every single unit on that side of the alley to all the noise from the trucks and the trash compactor and all of that stuff. Which brings me to the next question. When I go to Rafi Kebab, I see that alley there because sometimes I will park in the parking structure that is the building, that you're going to be building on. There's awful lot of trash cans and compactors that are in the alley. What happens to those? Do they stay there? Because if they stay there, it's going to be impossible to get in and out that alley. Are those something that, and staff can answer that question, do the project owners on the other side have to deal with that, or is that allowed to put all type of stuff in our alley? Because it was okay when it's
Check
just an
with
empty
Right.
lot, but now there's going to be a residential building. I don't want Mr. Ahern getting up. It looks like it hurts.
Mr. Chairman, the bins are in the public alley. The status of those bins being there is not something that I have the details on. It's often the case that we find this in the downtown where property owners have nowhere else to put their bins and they put them in the public alley. Staff would have to research that and get back to you. on it.
My concern is, it was fine when there was only commercial use there, but now we're introducing a residential use there.
Sure.
And I would not want to be one of those people living in those units having to smell the trash down there. I mean, that's different when you're in the office, and you leave, you go home, but you don't want to come home to that smell.
I understand.
Big difference.
It's very similar to what we experienced with the businesses in front of Lot 6, Porto's, Damon's. All of those businesses had their bins in the public alley, and eventually what was done was the agency worked with Public Works and the owners and built bin storage facilities in Lot 6 and also in the Orange Street Garage. So I'm not sure how this would be resolved. If they were compelled to relocate their bins, we'd have to explore it and come back to you.
Mr. Draymond?
Well, I have a question also about if the plan is to orient the project so that, and maybe I'm just I'm misunderstanding that condition. But if it's configured in a way that the paseo, which unless I misunderstand, is going to remain a public, not be owned by the city, but it'll be a public access way.
Well, the public will have access to it. The
Yes.
applicant is proposing to have some form of security there, but generally the public will have access to it.
All right, so if the public generally has access to it, why would I, as a potential buyer in this complex, want to be sitting out in my jacuzzi in the courtyard or whatever the public space is there, waving at the folks that are coming by the paseo? I don't understand that.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Draymond, that was, I think, he can speak for himself, Mr. Loomis, to reorient the building. He had that idea. For many of the reasons that Chris gave, the building stays in this configuration. What the condition is to work on the articulation of that south facade.
Well,
Here.
I understand, but, I see what you're saying, okay. Yeah,
Not to reorient the building.
I see.
So keep it as
In lieu of reorient.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Although that would be interesting to kind of wave out of the jacuzzi.
Yeah, I mean, it's an added benefit.
Mr. Quintero?
In terms of the breezeway paseo, I do agree that it needs to be set back as you've designed it and also greened with bamboo or other appropriate plants, maybe even some green hanging from the next level up going down. But that's it for me. I mean, it's basically just going to be a passageway in that working alley behind this project and the working alley behind Rafi's and the attorney's office and so forth. That's just a very difficult, this is a difficult site in general, and that's a very difficult intersection of two alleys that are obviously used for loading and unloading, and so we can do what we can, but it is what it is. It's basically a service alley for all the other companies.
Mr. Draymond?
So for me, just a paseo is, I think it's important that we try to do something there to kind of have it work with the Fidelity Fed building and with the new project. But overall, I like the design. I'm impressed with the design, and I don't necessarily agree that that any real changes have to be made in terms of the orientation or anything else.
Mr. Draymond?
Well, so far, Mr. Loomis, you're helping me out here. 1, 2, 3. Help me out with one more, because it's one that was just brought up. It was number 3 on the comments. Study a setback or change of materials. On this image,
Yes.
which was up but isn't up right now, could you or somebody show me there what the setback is you're talking about?
I'll just briefly describe it.
Okay.
Essentially what it is right now on Louise Street, you see a 6-story building from the street all the way up to the roof line, full 6 stories. The suggestion is that either at the 4th floor or at the 6th floor to have the facade step back no more than perhaps even 3 or 4 feet, so that the building really appears to be a 5-story building with a penthouse as opposed to a full 6-story building. And that's this intention of that suggestion. And Mr. Dikiakos and I have briefly discussed that, and you could probably elaborate on the feasibility of that better than I could.
Okay, could
somebody actually
you
go up
point
and
that out?
Point it out.
Without talking.
Nancy, I have her card. I'm going to call her up.
May I ask you then, the view that you're concerned is from Louise?
So that corner, you want to set that back, where the 2 trees are. You're talking about that section.
Right. The concern is not so much if you're standing in front of the building, it's more if you're, say, standing at the corner of Broadway and Louise looking at the building from a distance or across the street, what the appearance of the building is. So if you're standing directly adjacent to the building, it's tall and 3 or 4 floors is 3 or 4 floors. So it's a suggestion rather than a condition that they explore it and come back with whether or not it's possible to do that. And as they move forward, we can look at whether that is actually helpful or not.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. And on the breezeway, there is this page. Can somebody put that one up? It shows the side elevation from the breezeway. Okay. I understand that there is at least two railings are semi-transparent. The other ones are more opaque. But that gray area is in the same level as that's the parking lot. Is there a parking lot in that area? I'm assuming. In your cross sections, it shows that there's parking lot.
Effectively, it's a parking lot.
Okay.
At the lowest level.
Okay, and how high is that?
It's a total of 11.5 feet.
Okay, and at that point is where you brake and go back?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So the braking happens only where the gray area is, correct?
That's correct. It actually sets back right along this line here.
Okay.
And it sets back another 5 feet. That becomes a landscaped area also, so that when one is walking on the Paseo, you actually get both the landscaping at ground level, plus there'll be some overhanging landscaping from the podium edge.
Okay. So where the brown is, that's going to be right at the property line?
This portion is right at the property line. That's correct,
And,
yes.
and the two ends?
This end here is at the property line. This, which is a stair tower, is actually also set back that full
Oh, it is
5
set
feet.
back.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And is there any plan for doing something with that, so it's not just plain old?
Yes, actually, that was one of the comments that Mr. Loomis gave us, and we're going to work together through that, yes.
All right, that sounds good. And please have a seat. I have one other card. Nancy Kemp.
How much time are you allowed?
5.
Here, would you like these?
Okay. My name is Nancy Kent, and when I wrote my comments, I had only noticed the 15-foot passageway between the buildings. I was not aware of the additional 5-foot setback, making it 20 feet, but nevertheless. I am a current homeowner in southeast Glendale and a former duplex owner on a busy street 2 blocks south of the heart of old downtown Venice, California, where the arches are. I lived on the second floor of this 2-story duplex for 30 years. There was a 4-story apartment building next door and a 4-foot passageway between these two buildings. The proposed residential building on Louise is entitled to have 4 stories, and it's getting 2 additional stories because of the public benefit of public open space, a 20-foot wide passageway along the south side of the building. When I think of a 20-foot passageway between a 6-story building and a 2-story building, I do not think of it as a public benefit. I think of it as a security concern and possibly as a public hygiene concern. And yes, downtown Glendale is very, very different from downtown Venice, but they are both busy downtown areas. I would like to know what the Glendale police think about this proposed public passageway. The open space is a public benefit, though, because it provides some natural light for the south side of the building. So in theory, during peak hours, people might use less electricity because of the natural light. On the north side of this building, though, there is no passageway at all, 0. In the 1950s, I asked a kid who lived in a brand new apartment building on Chevy Chase south of Colorado how it was living in that building. And she said she didn't like it very much. And 50 years later, I remembered that the only specific thing she said that she didn't like was that some of the rooms don't have any windows. So here are my 2 cents. I would suggest the open space does not necessarily need to be public open space. The post office across the street has a wide lawn, and I do not ever see people using the lawn. And I would also suggest that the 20-foot passageway should be divided so there's a passageway on both sides of the building, whether it's 10 feet and 10 feet or 15 feet and 5 feet or some other combination, but at least 3 feet on each side of the building. I lived in a building next door to a taller building that got natural light and a little bit of natural ventilation on the side with a 4-foot passageway between the buildings. So please do not say that no natural light would come in. The possibility of people using less electricity is a tangible public benefit, and during power failures, residents will really appreciate having operable windows in every room, especially on a very hot day. Regarding the city's vacation of the alley, I assume the redevelopment agency will require adequate compensation to the city from the private owner who will receive this public land. I do not see a need for an alley here. I don't live in this neighborhood, but I travel on this block of Louise Street every day. And since I have a minute left, I'll mention, I noticed on the plans as I look at these units, if I'm reading the plans correctly, some of the units that are on the north side of the building only have windows on one side, and those windows open out onto a very narrow passage, an interior passageway. So I do hope that they'll be able to have windows at least on 2 sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy, let me help you, if you don't mind, on the plans. As I looked at it, that is a corridor, not a passageway. And what you see there are actually doors opening into those units. Every one of those units actually faces the interior courtyard. So what faces the passageway or the corridor, most of them are bathrooms. So you have a corridor, bathroom, and then you have the kitchen, and it opens into the living room or the bedrooms, which basically face they have windows into the courtyard, which is very large. So I just wanted to help you out at least on the plans. Maybe I have a color plan and it's a little bit easier to see. Sometimes black and white is very difficult to decipher. Okay. Any other comments? All right. One other question from either consultant or any special features in this building that moves in a direction of, it's a green building, low energy, something that Al Gore will be happy with now that he has a Nobel Prize on top of his Oscar?
Chairman Yusefian, we talked briefly, Chris and I did, prior to this hearing, about trying to determine what type of greening of the building could take place. We're discussing solar panels as an option or as an opportunity to look at in terms of one idea. That would be the extent of what our discussions have taken place as it relates to that item. If there's any other suggestions that you may have or any other members of the agency, we'd certainly be happy to listen to them, though.
Well, my recommendation would be is to get a hold of a copy of a document that Western Cities published. There is a whole section on sustainable buildings, talk about different materials you use, things like instead of using oak flooring, you could use bamboo flooring, which is more sustainable, and so on and so forth. It actually will be cheaper probably for you.
Yeah.
Look at those,
Sure.
just building material-wise, trying to leave as little footprint on this nature as possible. So, and
We certainly will.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'll move 6B1.
Cards, and I haven't said a word yet.
Mrs. City Attorney.
Two things, yeah. Mr. Chair, members of the agency, if all the cards are ready, of course, we've closed the
I
public
have one
hearing.
more.
Cards.
And then at that time, when you're ready, I have a modification to the motion.
Okay, yeah, modification. Greg Astoyan.
Thank you. Greg Astorian, RE/MAX. I just wanted to make a comment or two about the comments that were made about the passageway, the alley, or the future paseo. Obviously, as far as hygiene is concerned, what we're proposing will be far more hygienic than what it is right now. Secondly, this alley, if you go back to 1900s, there was no alley. This was an easement given to the city of Glendale between the two, the DPSS, the owners of that property, and the apartment building at 111 North Louise. So the city of Glendale at this time owns the easement on the alley. So basically what is going to happen is that easement is going to be extinguished. However, the benefits of it will stay with the city of Glendale because hundreds of thousands of dollars is going to be spent to turn that into a paseo, not just to leave it in an unsightly alley that it is today. With that, that's the only comments that I had.
There
Thank
was some talk about security providing.
Yes, and the jury is out for that, and there's not been a decision made on that, and I'm sure we will be able to address that in future also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarkis Orfalian. Last card.
Good afternoon,
Your
Mr.
name-
Chairman and
your name
members
for
of
the
the
record?
agency. My name is Sarkis Orfalian, and as some of you may know, we occupy and own the building just west of the DPS building. And the concern that I'm here for is mainly the alleyway and the fact that that alleyway will not be possibly available for vehicular access. One of the things that I disagree with some of the speakers is that, contrary to what's been said, that alley is used for vehicular traffic presently and a lot. And as Mr. Chairman, you indicated, that is a very congested area because of the restaurants and some of the other delivery trucks and some other vehicles that come in there. And the concern is, if that alleyway is blocked, the only access anyone will have would be through Broadway, the alleyway next to Rafi Kebab, and that's the only way because I'm sure you're aware the alley that continues behind our office building, which is the east-west alley, is blocked at Maryland. So there's no exit there. This is the only way to come in and out is off of Broadway. And that will create a lot of congestion. And I think even for emergency vehicles, or if there's an emergency, I don't think people can even come in during the busy lunch hours, for example. Right now, at least on 2-3 occasions a week, we will call the parking enforcement to come in and tow vehicles out of there as it is now. So I can imagine how that would change the congestion even worse. One other concern that we had, I think it's been answered, but I'd like a clarification, is whether the parking entrance to this specific proposed project will be off of Louise, or that also will be from the back alley?
Louise.
Okay, strictly off of Louise. That obviously will provide some help, but that is the main concern because, as I said, that's the only way we can get to our parking lot, and it's very frustrating presently. I can only imagine how bad it will be then. Quite often in the mornings or when I'm coming back from court to go to my office, I have to wait there 10, 15 minutes in my car to just have access to my parking lot. So that is a serious concern that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say you always keep your parking lot in good order.
Thank you.
Every time I go to Rafi's, I notice your cars are organized and parked, but you're absolutely right. It's going to be a difficult circulation.
Thank you.
Okay. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Weaver.
This is a difficult site to work with, no doubt about it. The building's on both sides. However, I won't support this for a number of reasons. The building ought to be turned 180 degrees. I don't care to see a 6-story front wall staring at me off of Louise. I think it ought to be reversed, and the patio, the fountain, everything facing east. To the west, you have to get above 2 or 3 stories before you have any view to the west. During the summer, anytime, you're going to have the blazing sun hitting there on that area, plus to all the balconies there, hot sun. If it's facing east, you have the advantage of having, in 100-degree temperatures, having it much cooler if it's facing the east, where people can go outside, barbecue, whatever. To the east, you're looking at the post office parking lot and no buildings. To the west, what is your view? You don't have it. As far as the alley's passageway, nobody in their right mind is going to walk through there. We've already had to call the police on the Chess Park with problems down there. You put that passageway there, nobody's going to walk. They're going to walk down to the corner of Broadway and walk down the street. People are not going to feel safe at night in there. And the passageway that's west of that comes off Maryland, which was supposed to be a connectivity through, it's not going to do anything for this. If anything, that is wide enough, as I recall, that you could have traffic coming off of Maryland to the restaurant there, converting that. Because I don't know how much that is used for any kind of pedestrian traffic, and if it was used for the existing parking lot, which is being removed. So there's no advantage to having that blocked from traffic coming off of Maryland into the restaurant area there. And then, of course, the colors are misleading because I can look at the pictures, color pictures of what the brick looks like and that. The architecture leaves some to be desired. I was looking for something that's going to pick up the DPSS building in terms of colors and styling. So, sorry, to me it's facing the wrong way. I know I used to live 68 on 303 North Jackson, 3rd floor facing west. And not only I, but every time I go by there, every single unit facing west has their blinds drawn and shades down, heavy shades. I had to go out and get extra heavy shades because of that blinding sun come in. And doesn't make any sense to have all these units facing that way. Sure, you turn it around, you're still going to have units facing that way, but maybe you do a different design. I just think it's much more livable if the urban area is facing east and you have the advantage of it stepping up. It's much more pleasing to the eye if you're walking on Louise. I'd take out that pass through that breezeway. I wouldn't use it. That, if I calculate it out, it's about 2,250 square feet. If you're going to do it, set the building back 2,250 and put the open space on Louise, where it'd be much more usable than down an alley that will be dangerous for people at night. At least they will perceive it's dangerous. Everything on that block, you have the YMCA, the back of the theater, you have another parking lot. The post office, you tell me what foot traffic's going to come down Louise and cut through that spot. Next to none. They'll go down where they feel safe on Broadway. So I'm sorry.
I can't support this at all.
Do you have?
I have a question.
Mr. Nachari.
Addressing those concerns, Mr. Dikiakos, is there a reason why the building is oriented opened towards the west as opposed to the 180-degree flip?
Yes, it's really because of the overlook that you're getting from each side. As I said in my presentation, we have the theaters on one side, which is really completely blocked. We have the backside of commercial buildings on the west side. You have the Paseo and the DPS building, which is also a facade that has nothing to look at. And so what we've tried to do is actually just keep it an internal-oriented building, facing the way that it does so that you get evening sun. And we felt that the units would be much more livable facing that way as opposed to facing the Paseo and the blank facade of the DPS building. I think would feel much more constrained as a site and as a building if it was facing that way.
Well,
Mayor, I totally agree. You wouldn't want it facing either one of those. In fact, I'd bring the building right up to the DPSS building, taking that alley up. But I mean oriented facing east, not south,
Right.
not north, east.
180 degrees, so not, I understand you've got the movie theater and you've got the DPSS. But,
Right, yes.
But I think his suggestion is have the
Also,
courtyard-
literally turn it, just flip it right around.
Right.
Right around.
I see.
I mean, when it's 100 degrees out there, some evening, 4 o'clock, blinding sun, nobody's going to be out there. If you've got the shield of the building behind you, you're going to come out and maybe barbecue or sit with the family.
Oh, outdoor
on that-
barbecuing.
Oh, outdoor barbecues. Oh, I forgot. Oh, jeez. But I think it'd be much more pleasing to have
I
in
think,
a hot day.
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate comment. I think just strictly from, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Loomis, but I think just strictly from an urban planning standpoint, you're really trying to, I mean, we're always fighting, trying to create a strong facade along all street frontages.
You can still do that on the first floor. You can still have the units, commercial, whatever it's going to be, a drugstore, small coffee shop, or whatever, facing onto Louise. But once you get it above the pedestal, I think starting to step back and showing that break in the mass for the U going back, it's going to be much more pleasing coming down Broadway looking at or walking on Louise than it is to see the wall straight up, and the courtyard and everything is hidden from just about all public view.
Right.
Just doesn't do it for me. No offense.
Fair enough. It's no offense taken. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. You have a question?
Comment?
Mr. Chair, I just wondered if at the time that your motion is being made, the recommended change to this is where, parenthetically, in the middle of the motion, it says, which project includes an additional 2 stories and a .50 FAR for providing, it says 1237.5 square feet. That's the minimum amount of square footage that's required to be provided. This project is providing 2250. So that's the change. Instead of 1237.5, it should read 2250.
I said.
That's right. That's correct.
Okay, with that provision, I'll move 6B1.
Second.
With comments?
Yeah, with those comments.
The motion is second. Roll call, please.
Agency members Draymond,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
No.
Chairman Yusefian.
Aye. Next item, please.
Any agency member or staff comments?
Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned.
And we recess to closed session.
And I need to announce that I will not be a participant in the closed session item what is the closed session item number? It is 2B. 2B, due to a financial conflict involving ownership in real estate, which may be affected by the location or non-relocation of the Glendale Public Library located on Brand Boulevard.
Blah, blah, blah.